Hello and welcome to the Publicly Challenged Podcast. I'm your host, Luke Oswald, and I hope you join me on my quest for knowledge to become a better hunter, angler, and forager. Stick with us, and who knows, maybe we will learn something together. Before we get to the show, I just want to mention a few things. Initial Ascent packs, they're awesome. I used a 2K all last season. I'm still using it now for stuff. I'm going to be using it for training for prepping for my hunt and getting some miles in with some weight on my back. And I just recently picked up a 6K, and it's going to be awesome as well. Plan on using it on my elk hunt along with the 2K if I'm doing some day hunts or something and having a base camp. But if I'm packing on my back and going in there, depending on where I'm at, I'm going to be using that 6K. Dennis and Joe are amazing people. What's awesome about that company is you can reach out to them, and they're the ones who are going to answer your call and actually talk to you about their product. And you're going to even get a handwritten note from them thanking you for your purchase and wishing you luck on that hunt. And I just find that is super awesome and amazing in this day and age to have somebody that does that for you and actually handwrites a note for you is just amazing. And on top of that, it's an American-made product. And one thing about this podcast is, and myself, is just that anything that's American-made that I can support or get behind and it's a quality product, I'm going to talk about it. This is not a paid promotion. I'm honestly just talking to you about an amazing pack. So check them out. If you don't have one or you're looking for a pack, give them a try. You'll like it for sure. And then on top of that, we're going to talk about TreelineAcademy.net. TreelineAcademy.net is the most comprehensive e-scouting course ever made. Mark Livesey is just an amazing wealth of knowledge, and he's willing to share that with everybody. So check that out and see what's going on there with that. Use promo code PC2020. Save yourself 20% on sign up. It's awesome. And actually, it's not 20%. It's $20. Save yourself $20 off a sign up. Then the next one I want to talk about is Basemap. Basemap app with their hunt data, the online mapping system for e-scouting, setting waypoints, smart markers. So you have all your hunt data on the wind and anything, as long as you have a cell signal. It's absolutely amazing. There's so much more that's coming out. They've updated their offline maps, so they're way faster than they used to be, which I know a lot of people were actually kind of complaining about that, but now they're lightning fast. I've downloaded them, used them. It's awesome. On top of that, they've got some new updates that are coming out that are just going to blow you away. Can't talk about them yet, but we will be talking about them. So check them out. Use promo code PC25. Save yourself 25% on sign up, only on the website, not on the app. And with that being said, let's get to our show. All right, so I'm sitting here and I am talking to the wonderful Dr. Hilary Lampers. So, Doc Hilary, can you please go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit?
Hi, I am Hilary, or Dr. Hilary, as a lot of people know me, or Doc. I don't know. I get a lot of nicknames going on. I am a naturopathic physician in Montana and Washington, but I currently live in Montana. Obviously, probably many of your listeners know my husband, Ryan Lampers, who everybody has the man crush on. I'm just really the back, like behind the scenes person who makes everything happen while Ryan's out in the mountains making it happen there. So we've been married for 24 years this June, which is crazy. We have a podcast as well, Hunt Harvest Health, that we started in 2016. And then we also have a brand called Stealthy Hunter, Healthy with an H. And then on top of all that, the Stealthy Hunter is mainly an informational website where that was our original brand. We started talking about gardening, hunting, nutrition, health care, really all the things we love to do. We do have some products on there we've developed, and then we branched out. We have a nutritional company now called Healthy Nutrition. We sell CBD and high quality nutritional products for the outdoor and hunting industry. That's kind of our niche. And then we also have an events company, and we do the Western Hunting Summits, which is where I met you originally.
Yep.
And then I also have a full-time patient care practice in Bozeman. So I do 4 days a week of patient care along with all that other stuff. So, and I have 2 young children and a home and a husband that's gone a lot. So that's my story.
But so,
Yeah.
one of the things that kind of drew me to having you on the podcast and educating us is all the cool stuff you talk about that normally you don't hear, especially in, a guy's world, right? You hear about like maybe nutrition and you hear about exercise and fitness, but how often do you hear about the hormones and things affecting your hormones and how you can regulate those better or change it where they can impact your life in a meaningful way? And that's something that I really wanted to talk about with you today.
Hey, well, cool. I can talk about that stuff all day long. That's not a problem.
So, one of the things everybody always talks about is testosterone, right? And,
Yep.
how do I get my T up higher and all that kind of stuff. But a lot of times it's other things that affect that are causing low testosterone, or maybe it's not even low testosterone, something's masking that, right?
Yeah, so low testosterone is interesting because obviously it's going to affect older guys. And when I say older guys, it's just probably going to affect guys in the past anyways, probably over 40 more than the guys under 40. Um, Testosterone is the main male hormone, obviously. And the funny thing is I think men think that like testosterone is literally the only thing they have going on in their body, but it's not. But it's what gives you your male sexual characteristics, and so it is a very important hormone for men, obviously. And it obviously sort of peaks in your teens, early 20s, mid 20s, and then I think at age 30, the statistics show you go down 1% every year from there. And obviously, just like women who have hormonal cycles and stuff, the reproductive years, when you're trying to create children, you want to have good levels of testosterone. If you're a woman, you want to have good levels of estrogen and progesterone, et cetera. And this is how the population grows and expands, is by these hormones working appropriately. Now, there's lots of other hormones. I think the year you came to the Western Hunting Summit, I did a discussion on hormones, and I put up like a slide of all the hormones in the body. Testosterone was one little square. But again, men seem to focus in on that square. And we can talk about some of those other hormones if you want. But testosterone, again, is to improve sperm production, fertility, and to give you things like energy, stamina, motivation, push you to climb those mountains and do that CrossFit workout. And it also helps you deep sleep, stimulates, helps with growth hormone synthesis, obviously sperm production and sexual arousal, as well as function, and then mood, lots of that kind of stuff. So it's very important. The brain has more testosterone receptors than any organ in the body. So the brain is heavily influenced by testosterone. So there are lots of things naturally in life that over your lifetime will either help you simulate testosterone or decrease your testosterone depending on the stages of your life. But there's also things now in the environment, really in the last 50 years, that have been really impacting men's testosterone as well as sperm counts and, their overall health as they age. And so what I'm seeing as an actual clinician, I'm doing mainly men's health, is that men are really suffering from low testosterone at an earlier age. And that's unfortunate because, there's a stereotype of how men are, well, there's a couple stereotypes now, but, nowadays, I feel like, and I say this with the utmost of care and love for people and being a clinician, but young men today, 20s, 30s, 40s, young children, boys today, they have been severely impacted by the environmental influences that we've had in the last 50 to 60 years, 70 years, mainly the introduction of plastics, and chemicals, herbicides, pesticides, etc., which are all what we call xenoestrogens, and they mimic estrogen in the environment, and they also can attach to estrogen receptors in the body and stimulate estrogen. So this is bad for both men and women. We've heard a lot of what's called estrogen excess, and how this really affects men is that you do have estrogen. Men seem to think they have no estrogen. Actually, estrogen is really important for a lot of different functions in men, one including mood, bone health, cardiovascular health, sexual function, these kinds of things. But you want it to be at a lower level, right? Women obviously have a lot more estrogen because they take most of their testosterone and they turn it into estrogen. But when you have all these estrogens in the environment, we do know that now boys, children in utero, boys in utero, they are being affected by all these chemicals that are in their mother's cord blood. And these chemicals affect testosterone synthesis. And so I think today we have the challenge of dealing with a population of men that were born in a time when they were being exposed to all these chemicals. And that will have an effect on hormone production as well as sperm production and overall mood and behavioral aspects. And so we do see fertility rates going down. I mean, we do see these things in both men and women. And so what I try to do is, typically the average guy coming to me is like a 40 plus guy, right? He's starting to have all the symptoms. Maybe he's overweight. He's got some insulin resistance. He's not sleeping well. He's starting to notice some things, and his primary doctor has just written him off as, you're getting older. This is what happens. The guy's age. This is going to be how your life is now. And the great thing about today is because we have so much information at our fingertips, most guys come in with Dr. Google and they've like researched every single thing about testosterone, and they've really narrowed it down. They're like, I swear I have a testosterone issue. Like, this is my problem. And so I'll work with them. We do a lot of labs and blood work, and we do that. But I'm starting to see 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds literally coming in, and we're running the same programs. And I have 70 and 80-year-old male patients who have higher testosterone than 20 and 30-year-old males. So the question is, why is that? And again, I think it comes back to that those 70 and 80-year-old men, when they were born and they were exposed, their hormone synthesis, their sperm production, all those things, they were not having the same sort of chemical exposure as a young child that boys and men have. And let's just say post-war era. And now, and a lot of people don't want to admit that, because I think there's this stereotype of like, oh, those hippie granola green people trying to sell us like that, the global warming, and it has nothing to do with that. It has that we have slowly over time contaminated ourselves by the things that we've created to make our lives easier. So like, I can't go to work in an average day and not be using latex, plastic, sterile things, all these things that save lives and make my life easier, but also protect me from COVID and everything else. I use those things. And we all use plastic water bottles, and we all have, if you just look around the room you're in right now and you look, everything in there that's plastic. So there's importance to know different plastics, and, there's a lot of information out there, but I do think that the men nowadays are having more of this dysfunction earlier on because there's just more influences. And then of course you add into that, people aren't moving as much, right? These younger guys are not exercising. They're on their phones, lots of screen time. They're not as active as like, I'm in my 40s, and when we were kids, we were outside all day. And I was lucky enough to grow up in Montana, in the 80s, when it was just like nobody knew a Bozeman. Bozeman had nothing going on for it except that it was an awesome place to live. Obviously, everybody's figured that out now, and it's turned into insane. Like, I just had my house appraised. I had my house appraised a year ago, and I had my house appraised this week. And I will not tell you what it appraised at in 1 year, but and I don't even live in Bozeman. I live 30 minutes outside of Bozeman. It's insane.
I bet you it's probably about
Bozeman,
3 times, right?
It's yeah, it's not 3 times, but in a couple years, it will be 3 to 4 to 5 times.
That's insanity.
And in Washington, so it's really crazy. But what I'm saying is, like, we were outside all the time. My parents would kick us out, and we had the freedom to roam, to go out and to just be outside. We didn't have computers, phones, tablets, none of this stuff. We listened to the radio, we watched some PBS, and we watched MASH every week. That was like what my parents did. Okay. And so as the generations have come and technology has advanced, and I even see it in myself now as a 40-something-year-old woman who has a career, an online business, a podcast. I do all clinical care online. Everything is now through electronic medical records. In my average day, how much time I spend on my phone and my computer is absolutely ludicrous and unhealthy. Yeah. There's no doubt about it. And so for me to get away from that, I have to purposely make time to stay off my electronics. But like, even when I work out, I have a workout app that gives me my workouts. So I have my iPad on while I'm doing my workouts, or I'm on my elliptical with my iPad. So the only time I really get away from it is going into the mountains. Well, my husband does that 6 months out of the year. He might have a camera in his face more now than he used to. Obviously, for 20 years, he never had a camera in his face. Nobody knew who he was. But the difference in that kind of activity, getting outside, compared to the activity a lot of people are doing now today, where they're still being totally surrounded by electronics and waves and blue light and all this stuff. It's radically changed our biochemistry, and you're seeing it in hormones, because hormones are very sensitive to the environment, and they're very sensitive to our lifestyle. And it's like the chicken and the egg. What starts it? You don't really know sometimes. Did you get a hormonal imbalance that threw off things, and now, it's like this? Or did your poor lifestyle create hormonal imbalance? There's lots of different ways, but sometimes as we get older, it's hard to tell what the chicken and the egg is anymore. And so yeah, that's kind of the lowdown. That was a really long answer.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But it was full of information, right? So one of the things like, what are the factors then? I know you kind of mentioned them, like plastics and all these things, but how do those affect what hormones? And then how can you maybe prevent those? Or like you talked about all the screen time and the blue light, and that affects sleep, right? So then if it's affecting your sleep, there's other hormones there that will be out of balance that will in turn, right, affect your testosterone, affect other levels of other things that really cause problems.
So there is it's really interesting in the hormonal pathway of men and women, is we are actually identically the same. Our steroid hormone pathway, and I have a paper here somewhere I was going to show you, but it's basically exactly the same. So from cholesterol, we make all of our steroid hormones, which is testosterone, all your androgens. There's many other androgens besides testosterone, estrogens, progesterone, cortisol, which you've all heard about with the adrenal glands. Melatonin is affected as well, serotonin, and neurotransmitter function, cholesterol. And we all go through the same pathway. When we get to testosterone, men keep most of their testosterone. Women, we convert most of our testosterone into estrogen. Okay. So as like a species, males and females are identical in the actual steroid hormone pathways that they have. They're just doing it a little bit differently. Okay. And that's what will give us, because you have testes and I have ovaries, and you have a Y chromosome and I have 2 X chromosome, that determines how my body's going to process those steroid hormones. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So what's really interesting today is that cholesterol is sort of become this evil, right? Like, I know in the 80s, the whole movement of like, eat margarine instead of butter, and cholesterol is bad for you. And like, just in the, 20, 30, 40 years of this whole idea that Cholesterol is bad and we have to get rid of it because it causes cardiovascular disease. Now, cardiovascular disease is the number one killer of both men and women. I believe last year, cardiovascular disease killed more people than COVID, maybe 3 times as many people as COVID. And a lot of the people that died with COVID had cardiovascular disease, and that's what we call a comorbidity. So definitely cardiovascular disease is is a factor. But the whole idea that cholesterol is somehow evil and we need to always be decreasing cholesterol has kind of in turn created some problems, because cholesterol actually makes all these steroid hormones. Like, it starts the process. So if you have low cholesterol to start, you can imagine your steroid hormones are going to be low. And then you have things like, like a statin medication. Statin medications are given to millions of people to decrease their cholesterol levels. And they can be very helpful because they decrease inflammation in the vessel and supposedly decrease cholesterol levels. But over time, statins, because they decrease cholesterol so much, they can lead to hormonal deficiency and dementia, because the brain requires a lot of cholesterol to stay healthy and function. And when you lower cholesterol too much, the brain sort of basically becomes starved over many decades of being on statins. And so we do see more dementia in statin patients over time. We also know that the toxins come in and they play a role again in this steroid hormone pathway. They start going in and mimicking estrogen. And we won't get into it, but estrogen metabolism is actually the most important piece in both men and women in how you're going to detoxify your steroid hormones. And so if you've got a lot of these estrogen-like components in your environment and you're constantly mimicking estrogen, there's 3 different pathways in detoxification of estrogen that you can have. There's one that detoxes a certain estrogen and you get rid of it in your body. There's another pathway that's sort of neutral, doesn't really do a whole lot. There's one that's cancer causing, meaning it's DNA damaging. So if you're pushing a lot of estrogen down that pathway, that's DNA damaging. So we think of breast cancers and ovarian cancers and cancers in general, any kind of estrogen receptor positive cancer. And the concern too in men with like prostate cancer is that I just say estrogen makes things grow. Estrogen is like, it makes babies grow and fat cells grow and boobs grow. And it also makes cells replicate faster, and it could make tumors grow, So this whole idea of an estrogen receptor positive cancer, like breast cancers and ovarian cancers, can be labeled that way. But also in men, you want to be careful that the guy is not getting so much estrogen or testosterone converting into estrogen, or all these estrogen in his environment. Is this leading to more prostate cancers, more tumors, and different types of cancers like that? So estrogen is like needed. It's very essential. What I see in men that don't have enough estrogen, and this happens as well too, because remember, if your testosterone is really low, your estrogen is going to probably be low. I'm not going to necessarily see the toxic element of estrogen in your blood when I run your blood, but you could be exposed. You could be showing some estrogen excess signs based on, like, your job would be a great example. If you go to work every day and you work around diesel gas, or you work in a plant where they, I don't know, wrap things in plastic all day, or you microwave your food every time you eat in plastic, you're getting plastic into you like all the time. And so you're probably going to see some possibly estrogen excess symptoms, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're like seeing that in blood work. So that's where kind of clinical experience comes in, and you look at exposures and could this be affecting this? But men with low estrogen, they're depressed. They're sort of not very excited about life, and they tend to have this kind of melancholy depression. They have erectile dysfunction. There's a number of things. But then if you have too much estrogen, so let's take a bodybuilder, because everybody kind of knows the stereotype of a bodybuilder who's cycling steroids. And we know that the side effect typically of those steroids is you're going to have a huge increase in estrogen. And men get moody, irritable, they're crying at commercials, and they want to put their hand through a wall. Like they're easily angered, and they're like a PMSing woman, basically. And you also have water retention, weight gain, elevated heart rate, heart palpitations, excessive sweating, not being able to sleep at night, and erectile dysfunction. So you can see how like estrogen has like a happy place, and she lives in this happy place. But if she gets too little or too much, you start to see problems. Testosterone itself is upstream from estrogen. And if your testosterone gets way too high, it's an androgenic hormone. So it's going to make things like grow. And what I'll see in guys is when it gets too high, you're going to produce more estrogen. And it's the estrogen side effects that guys are really feeling. But that high testosterone is very anabolic. So it makes you like, because you're processing that at night when you sleep. So that's why you have to sleep, because testosterone is produced at night. So one of the guy comes in and he's got horrible sleep, or he works a swing shift and he's got low testosterone. If we want to naturally try to tackle some of this, we have to address the sleep. Because I could go give you hormones all day long. You still have a crappy sleep schedule, or you're not, you know what I mean? You're not even going to utilize that hormone as well. Like we have to get sleep. Again, chicken and egg. It goes low, sleep suffers, but if you don't sleep well, it suffers. So you gotta, lifestyle is always key. But, it's like, I've had guys where their testosterone's way too high, or they dose themselves too high. And they literally sleep like 3 hours, and then they wake up like ready to go to the gym. They're like, Mom, why am I awake at 3 a.m, like ready to go? And I'm like, well, because testosterone is so anabolic, you're just getting all that like anabolic activity. But again, that's not necessarily healthy. And this is why in the bodybuilding world, in the steroid world, like they have to do cycles, they're not doing these all the time. And when I talk about hormones and like replacement, or I've talked on multiple podcasts about testosterone replacement, we are doing physiological dosing. We are getting you into a physiological range where you feel good, you're more functional, you're not supraphysiological. You're not like doing stacks, and you're not doing rounds of steroids, which takes you into the super physiological range. Then you've got to manage all the symptoms of that. So you have to cycle that. Otherwise a lot of bodybuilders do end up screwing up their endocrine systems, and then they have to actually get medical help to get off of them. Wow. Because without them, they are dysfunctional, right? Because everything plummets. When you take exogenous testosterone, your testes shrink and stop making your own. So if you stop taking testosterone, what happens? You have to slowly build your testes back up to getting the signal to make your own testosterone. So it's a rough ride when you try to get a guy off of steroids, or if he hasn't totally trashed his endocrine system that way. I've had to do it with guys that are on testosterone for, they're just so low and they've been on it, but they want to get their wife pregnant now. Basically, you have no sperm count when you take testosterone.
Wow.
Yeah. And I tell guys, like, don't think you're on birth control now and you can just go out and not be careful, because all it takes is one sperm. But basically, if we were to do a sperm count on you for fertility reasons, if you are on exogenous testosterone, your sperm count is going to be very low or close to zero. So you can imagine if your wife wants to get pregnant now, you have no sperm count. That doesn't really work very well. So you have to wean off the testosterone, and there's ways to do that with medication and support. So you have to do that though, because it's going to take 6 months, 12 months to get your sperm count back up. And there's lots of guys that do get their wives pregnant on testosterone, but it's very rare. It's not, like I said, it only takes one. But
and it's normally those girls, because they're tough.
Yeah,
because they're tough and they hang on, and they can stay there for days.
They do. The boys are like, nope.
I'm out. I'm bored. I'm out.
Well, so those are some of the reasons, right? Is like there can be influences in the environment. People are on statin medications, stress. So we get to cortisols. Cortisol is funny in women and in men as well. But, if you have excess cortisol around, estrogen kind of keeps it in check. So that's another thing. And guys, if your estrogen's super low, like you may not be able to handle stress as well because your cortisol's going up and you don't have anything to kind of keep it in check. Like a menopausal woman starts losing all her estrogen, and what do women come in complaining about? They're gaining weight around the middle. Where did this come from? What is this? I've never had this. And cortisol, if it's doing its thing, it's a blood sugar hormone, it's a stress hormone. It helps you get out of bed in the morning, really important. But in instances of high stress and or estrogen starts going down, there's nobody to kind of keep cortisol in check. And so he just starts running rampant. And if you're not exercising and you don't have a lot of energy output, etc., you just store it as fat, right? Because it has that correlation to insulin and blood sugar. So cortisol is an important one too. So chronic stress will definitely deplete your testosterone. And who is not feeling the effects of chronic stress these days, especially in the post-COVID world? I mean, we're all trying to manage as best we can, but and I think there's certain populations more stressed out than not with this situation that we've had. But I also think that, things like just normal life are stressful. And then you add into losing your job or your income or trying to figure out, how to work with your kids at home. I mean, I'm really lucky in Montana. Our kids went back to school in September.
That's awesome.
If we were still in Washington, I think the kids just went back to school. There are definitely stresses that will affect you. And then sleep, melatonin is a hormone that cortisol needs to be able to come down at night. So melatonin that's secreted by the pineal gland can come up, and then you can get tired and go to sleep. And that's also part of that steroid hormone pathway. So you can imagine if your cortisol is reversed or too high at night, these people are not getting the signal to sleep well, and they're going to bed at 1, 2 in the morning. And that's going to screw testosterone up, just because testosterone, again, is processed at night and when you're sleeping. So testosterone really helps with deep sleep. So if you have a guy come into you and he's complaining that he's not sleeping well, or a woman too, a lot of women start complaining as they go into their 40s with perimenopause that I just don't sleep. I don't know what's going on. Like, I wake up all the time. And so testosterone really helps with deep sleep. So a lot of times you'll sleep and you'll sleep lightly. You never really get into deep sleep. And so it will help with that. Yeah. Let's see. There's so many things.
So,
it's
we talked about like sleep, and like definitely blue light affects that, and you want to try and minimize that or kind of block that,
because
especially
it
at night,
blocks
right?
melatonin. Yeah, so it blocks melatonin. So when you get up first thing in the morning, you get exposed to natural light. Sun comes up, your brain gets the signal it's morning. And it's the pineal gland is getting stimulated, the brain gets stimulated, it wakes you up, cortisol goes up, get out of bed. And there's multiple other hormones that are doing it as well. All the neurotransmitters, what we call excitatory neurotransmitters, all the things that kind of excite your body to come out of sleep. So that natural light is what is that stimulatory thing. The advent of electricity, actually just electricity itself, really changed how humans sleep. And it's, I think, probably been one of the greatest benefits to humanity and probably one of the greatest deficits to humanity, in that when you have light and you can now be in the dark with this bright lights all the time, you have the choice whether or not you actually want to go to sleep. Whereas pre-electricity era, which really wasn't that long ago, humans were using kerosene, they were using candles, they were using fire, they were using these things. But even those lights, if you've ever been around a campfire, that's a very light light. It's like a more natural light, right? And then it kind of burns out and wanes. It's not this like beaming light that's like stimulating your body to wake up, which is what electricity and the new modern light bulb does. And so computers now have even added a whole new realm because of the blue light. And the blue light is this like back screen light that helps us see each other right now, but it's also stimulating my brain that way. And if you've ever been really sick, like I'll use me example, like when I was pregnant with both my kids, I had really bad morning sickness, like vomiting all the time. It's horrendous. And when you're really sick, you go to turn your phone on. You cannot look at your phone. It's like got a backlight and you see it flashing. It's really interesting. It's like your system becomes sensitive to everything. Like if you're not feeling well like that. And it was like, I couldn't even look at my phone. Like I would get dizzy and vomit and sick from my phone. So when you're healthy and you're not experiencing that, you're just looking at your phone all day thinking it's not doing anything to your brain. But when you actually get sensitive to your environment, like through illness or whatever, you can see all that flashing and that blue light. And it's actually, you realize how your brain is like, okay, I'm trying to deal with this. Turn that off. Like I can't handle that too. So we are just constantly overstimulated. And what is the best thing about going out into the mountains and into nature? And I'm really convinced, besides Ryan's addiction to hunting animals and going into these crazy places, is that you don't have that light. You go to bed when it gets dark. Like how many times have you been on a hunt or on a camping trip? It's 7 or 8 o'clock. It's dark. You're tired. You're going to bed. Yeah. You're like hanging out, unless you got a camper and you got all your lights on and you got all that light on. Maybe that's different. But if you're just in a tent, nowadays people have their phones and they're watching movies and they're doing that. So it's even hard, right? Like turn off your light. Like the old days, we go camping. I remember I grew up here in Bozeman. We go to Yellowstone all the time. And I remember my dad setting up a tent and we had a lantern. It wasn't a gas lantern. I think it was an electric lantern, but that was like it. And we had our little car, our Volkswagen Rabbit, and it had headlights on it. And like, if we needed light, my dad would like turn the headlights on, right? Like in the campsite at night. But we had this little lantern and we had a fire. And it was like, you would eat dinner and then you would just kind of be tired and you would just go to bed because it was dark. We didn't have phones. We didn't have all this stimulation, even in the backcountry. So I'm pretty convinced, even though I know Ryan has his phone in the backcountry, it's not working because he sends me a Garmin. And I think now his Garmin comes through his phone. I don't know. It used to be the Garmin came through this little thing you had to text in. So I would rarely get any text because I know he doesn't want to text into this little thing.
It was a pain in the butt.
But now I think it comes through his phone. So he texts me a lot more now than he used to, I think, because it's through his phone. But I know he's back there and it's like, once it's night, those guys are sleeping. And then they're woken up by natural light, or they wake up maybe before light and they're up and they're watching the sun come up. So that is like, it sounds so hokey to people who live in the city or we live the life we do. But just think back to those times and how good you felt and how good a week-long camping trip, you just come home refreshed and your brain feels calm. And I guarantee you in those moments, your hormones are improving. Like your cortisol is lowering. Now, unless you're somebody like my husband and Gritty or whoever, and you are pushing yourself to the max, you're hiking 25 miles a day, elevation, you're dealing with elevation, you're dealing with weather, you're, I don't know, getting shots of adrenaline with killing animals, you're doing night hikes all night long. So I absolutely do not say take my husband for example, because he's wrecking himself. He comes home, he's wrecked physically, but there's something mental that it draws him back to that. One, it's probably that shared suffering. It's the challenge, but I also believe it's just, he comes back to this environment with all this stimulus and all the like things he has to do, and his phone. I mean, he's literally on his phone all day long with work. He's like, I gotta go. And it's not like he's consciously doing that. I just think it's a subconscious thing where he's just like, okay, I'm not feeling good. Like, I got to go and get out of this mess. And that's probably the biggest fight that we have in our marriage, is that he does that a lot and I don't do it enough. And so I'm crazy woman all the time. And he's like, Mr. Chilled Out. Everyone's like, how does Ryan say so chilled out? And I'm like, well, because Ryan gets like 6 months a year in the mountains.
Nature therapy. That's
I don't.
Yeah.
I'm here running the website and doing shipments and with the kids. And, we had little kids for a while. You can't take like a 3-year-old into the backcountry for 2 weeks and do what Ryan wants to do.
No.
She's 6 now, though, and she loves to do that stuff. She loves to go camping. So as they get older, it gets easier for us both to get out there for long stints. But I would say that, the influence of electricity and the phones and the computers has definitely changed the way our melatonin functions at night. And so that's a big issue with sleep. So also for shift workers, first responders, firefighters, cops who work night shifts, these kinds of things, your body gets used to getting these cortisol and adrenaline rushes in the middle of the night, oh, okay, you got a fire, you got to wake up, and you get all worked up, and then that's over. Then you got to come back and go to bed. And it probably takes you an hour or so to get back to bed because you have all this going on. And, you do that over so many years. It starts to cause stress, or it starts to cause weight gain, starts to cause insulin resistance, starts to cause, hormone deficiency, whatever. So, yeah.
So like I don't know where I saw it. I saw it or read it or something, but it was even to help improve jet lag is contact with soil, and actually taking your shoes off and putting your feet in soil, and how it somehow resets you to where you are.
The hippie term is grounding, earthing. It's called earthing. So I think this was developed by people that live in cities who realize living in a city really sucks because you're surrounded by cement and concrete. And, like I'll take New York City, for example, New York City, if you've ever been there, is a crazy place. Like it's got, I don't know how many million, 12, 15 million people on
Too
that
many
island.
for me.
Yeah. But they have Central Park. And part of the theory, long time ago, they realized they needed to set aside a place where people could go and just have exposure to nature. So if you've ever been to Central Park, it's actually a super cool place because, yeah, there's a lot of people there. It's not like me going to the park here at Headwaters where there's 3 people there. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of people running and picnicking and boating and all that. But it's a large piece of property that allows people to go and get immersion, even if that means putting their feet on the ground in the grass, right? And it's therapeutic, and it's a very centralized place where people go and they gather and they're together. And so it's that whole idea, just having some nature. It's beautiful, actually, trees and waterways and stuff like that. So, that's kind of an extreme, but I think a lot of this earthing and grounding came from this idea that a lot of people, most of the world's population live in urban areas where they don't have maybe access all the time to great nature. So they find you go out and you'll just feel better even by standing on the earth with your bare feet. And it will help that there's what's called an ionic pulse of the earth. It's called pulsed electromagnetic therapy. And the earth actually has an electromagnetic therapy. I mean, we obviously know gravity. Gravity holds us down to the earth, so we're not all floating around in the atmosphere. It's a very strong pull that we have, that the earth has on us. It pulls us, keeps us grounded. And there's an electromagnetic energy of ions that's working as well. And so, when you go to the beach, like people, like, why are people drawn to the beach? Well, one is because there's sunshine and you can swim in the water, but what is it about the beach that people just, because there's a lot of negative ions at the beach and the water, and negative ions are what we need to help relax us. And so it's the same thing with nature. You get a lot of negative ions and it helps to relax your body. And again, because we are electrical beings. So soil, funny you bring up soil, soil is really the microbiome of the earth. And I've talked a bunch on my podcast and about the microbiome and gut health and all this stuff, so if we think of our bodies as an ecosystem, we have a microbiome, and we are actually more bacteria than we are humans. So we're basically just a form that is there for bacteria to feed on. Sounds disgusting, but it's true. And so our microbiome, how it's influenced by our lifestyle, our stress, our food, whatever. It's the same thing with the earth. So the earth's microbiome is the soil. And the soil has microbes in it. Everything in the soil that we need as humans to live is in that soil. And then, of course, we have sun and water and the things that, you plant a seed, roots go down, plant comes up towards the sun, it produces carbon dioxide. It produces oxygen for us to breathe, and it eats up our carbon dioxide. And like a cow poops and the poop goes into the ground, and then all the microbes in the soil eat that poop, and then it goes back up, and then it grows a plant, and then the cow eats the plant. And it's just like this cycle. And the microbiome of the soil basically represents the health of us. It basically represents the health of the animals. It represents the health of the ecosystem. And as far as humans go, humans aren't that healthy right now, and our topsoils have been depleted. We have a big soil issue. And we're even to the point now where people are talking about making fake beef to feed people, because why bother growing cattle? Because cattle basically take up so much energy and resource. Why don't we just create fake beef, or we don't even need a microbiome? We just can feed people something and then whatever. And it's like the whole cycle of like life is just totally negated in that whole theory. It's the cycle too of like a hunter. And what I've really come to respect about hunters, and is, if nobody knows, I don't hunt. So I am actually a non-hunter. But I've been hunting a little bit. I went with my daughter this last fall she killed her first mule deer. It was an amazing experience for me. I have a husband who I don't have to provide meat for my family. I have too much meat. I'm trying to would you like meat? Can I give you some meat? But if I didn't have my husband around, who he lives to hunt and be out there and be in that cycle, if he didn't do that, or for some horrible reason I lost that, I would do it. I would definitely hunt. At this point, I would be there's no doubt about it. I would have that to do it. It's just not really in my nature to do it. But watching my daughter do it, really interesting. Her and her dad are very similar, and just her cool, calm, collected attitude about it. And you just really see that cycle of life. But, after she killed her mule deer, of course, she killed it literally 60 minutes before the sun went down. And so we were 4 miles or something from our tents. And so we had to clean out this, and it was November, so it was cold and windy. And we had to break the animal down, clean it out, pack it on our backs in a snowstorm back to our tents. It was the classic Ryan Lampers night pack, suffer, low blood sugar. I thought I was going to pass out, sweating. Paley, I think, hit her sleeping bag, literally didn't even eat dinner. She just went in the tent and flopped on her belly. And the next thing I know, she was in her sleeping bag asleep. But there was that cycle of life, you spend all that hard work, you get the animal, you spend time with the animal right after it dies. It's not just you just think, oh, you got, there's some time spent with the animal, and the gratitude of that, and the whole, especially probably on a first hunt, the whole thing of oh my gosh, I just did that. And so, you have that time, and you take some pictures, and then you whatever. And then you realize, okay, we got to get this animal broken down. And then you go through the whole thing, Ryan breaking this animal down, us going through the insides, him showing us stuff, us doing organs, sectioning it out, putting in bags, putting it on back. That's a cycle that most people have no clue about. Nothing. They don't get their hands bloody. They're not up to their elbows in bodily fluids, which is building your microbiome. Okay. So studies have shown that people who hunt are exposed to blood from animals, have dogs, have farm animals, who garden, who whatever, they have more robust microbiomes. They are sick less and are healthier more. So when you experience that, and you're in that, and you've taken a life, and then you've You've been in the process of cleaning it up and then taking it home and then feeding it to your family. And there's, that circle of life. You've been in that animal's body, basically, right? You've been exposed to all this microbes and bacteria, and not only in his body, but the food that he was eating and the things that he was exposed to, like most people just they're not exposed to that at all. They have no clue. They just go to the grocery store, they just buy their meat. And now, we'll just sell you fake meat and you just won't even know the difference. And this is where it's like, okay, great. I mean, you're just further degrading people's connection with the process. You're further destroying their microbiome. And not only that, you're making them believe that they are not part of the global, life and death.
It's plugging them into the matrix almost.
Oh, if you don't think we're going into the matrix after the last year, I don't know where you've been, but you obviously are not you're not in the group of people that I'm talking about right now. And what I like about hunters and what I love about this community is, when I came into this community, I was very, I'm not a political person at all. I really hate politics, but I was much more I was that greeny liberal hippie person that everybody talks about, whatever. And that's because I actually, was raised in Montana. My parents were liberal, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't really matter, but we still spent a lot of time outside. And my mom had a lot of animals. I grew up with so many animals. So my mother is like an animal lover. She's like a saver of animals. But there was a dichotomy where a lot of people would think hunters are abusive people because they kill animals. There was never this, if you didn't know hunters and you didn't know and you didn't listen to the story. And also, I do feel like things have maybe changed some. I feel like the generations of people hunting today live in the modern world, and they're aware of how non-hunters perceive them, and they want to share the experience instead of just this because when I was a kid, it was in Montana, people just put their deer on their hood and drive around town. And it was I'm not saying I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying it wasn't very respectful. There just didn't seem to be the same amount of respect for animals. So I think a lot of people that got burned by that stereotype of the hunter, they went over more to the non-hunter circle because they felt like they had more respect and care for animals, which of course today, the people that I know in the hunting world have way more respect for animals than any non-hunter I know. Yeah. You know what I mean? But it's just, I think things have changed, but I do feel that, that's kind of what I came from. So I had this idea that I love animals so much and I'm like this thing. And what I really realized going on this hunt with my daughter and just having been married to Ryan for a couple decades is that is unfortunately the wrong way we look at hunters. And we should be looking at hunters as people that are keeping that cycle of life going, that they understand what it takes to actually take a life. It's not easy. And personally, I think anybody who thinks it's just easy and they just don't care and they're just killing things randomly, those in medical school and psych class, those are called sociopaths. They kill for fun. Right. That's a poacher. And I listened to a podcast yesterday. I forget who it was. It was about a ranger, not a park ranger, a warden who basically his job is to catch poachers. And he was talking about why people poach. And he said he thinks there are people that poach for food. So they need the food and they'll poach the deer for the food. So he was for the whole roadkill thing. If for the states to allow people to take roadkill home, because a lot of these poachers won't poach if they can get roadkill. And we're talking probably in lower income communities where, more rural, low income communities, people need the food. But he also said people that just poach, there are people that literally, one guy justified it because he was giving the meat away. He just couldn't stop killing. He actually just loved to kill. And he was he had a mental disease. Like he was not healthy in his mind. He was just killing these deer. And he justified it as, well, I'm helping the community and I'm giving this meat away. Well, you're just poaching animals because you just want to kill them. It's not like he was saying, I need the meat, I'm hungry, my family needs to fill the freezer, and I couldn't draw a tag and see, like, whatever the excuse was. So that was really interesting to Hill. So in medical school, we learned psychiatric disorders for the DSM, and sociopaths are people like, those are the kids that like torture animals for fun, right?
Yep.
They torture them. They don't just shoot like a squirrel with their BB gun and go, oh, look, I killed a squirrel. They like torture the squirrel, and I think that most of society has this idea that hunters are torturing the squirrel. You know what I mean? And I probably had that personification as well.
Yeah, I think
The
a lot of
problem
people
was,
do. I really do,
yeah,
especially with social media these days. You get one guy that puts a duck in his mouth or whatever, and people see that, or they do something kind of stupid or lay down naked next to the deer, and people see that, and it gets just repeated and repeated, and it's an echo chamber. And next thing you know, people think all hunters are doing that, and it's kind of a problem in itself. But at the same time, people need to look at it with an open mind and say, okay, maybe this guy's an idiot. All the rest of the people, maybe I can surround myself with a few more and try and get a feel for that versus actually trying to make a judgment. But
yeah, and I think we have to remember, like, whether you care or not, like what other people think, there's a lot of people like Ryan, I mean, he cares what you think, and he wants to be respectful, but like, if you want to tell Ryan how to live his life, he's just going to walk away from you. And he'll do it in the most respectful way, but he's going to be like, yeah, don't tell me how to live my life. Like but some people, they literally just don't think about they just don't care, and they don't think about it. So if if all your friends are hunters and you take a picture of you laying naked by a deer, all your buddies are going to think that's really cool. But the problem is, those are the kind of pictures that go viral. And then the majority, the 80 to 90% of the population that doesn't understand that, is going to be like, this guy's a sociopath.
Yep.
So if you are a sociopath, you're probably doing that more frequently, but you're probably the guy that, didn't kill the deer with a rifle with a good shot. You tortured the deer, and you did, whatever else, and you took this stupid picture with it. So there's a very small percentage of people that are like that. And unfortunately, like anything else, if those pictures get out, then it's like, everybody stereotypes you as that. And so what I would like to do is, when I have a conversation with a non-hunter, because actually most people are really intrigued by it, because in this day and age, most people are like realizing, one, the food system could crash. Two, the reliance that we have on the powers that be just to eat is insane.
It's a very fragile,
Very
system.
fragile. And people are starting to realize that they need to become more connected to that. And so I think it's fun to have a conversation with a non-hunter and just explain, that whole process, like just even talking about Paley's experience of the deer and being there and witnessing that, and the whole process, or having people go watch the film on Grady's channel. People are just like, wow, that was my dad, my birth father, he's super open-minded, but he's not a hunter. He called me and he said, that was a very emotional experience to watch Paley do that. He said, because I know Paley and I know her heart, and like, I know how she is, and I know Ryan, and to watch them do that together and to have that experience, he said, it was super powerful for me. And this is coming from a non-hunter. So I think we have to remember that. But how I want to bring it in is like, it's good to have these experiences and being connected to the animal, to the blood, to the soil. This builds you as a more robust person, and it creates health.
Yes, definitely.
Yes.
I think that's a good point to wrap it up. We kind of really tied it in there at the end. I like that.
Good.
So before we go, can you tell everybody where they can find you and Ryan and all the different channels, and if they wanted medical advice, how they could seek that if they're looking and their doctor's not giving them the right answers? Maybe there's a natural way to pursue that.
Sure. So we have so many platforms, but probably the best one is Stealthy Hunter, STH, is our website. The podcast is huntharvesthealth.com. That also goes to the same place, but that's going to give you lots of information, recipes, blogs. We have some great contributors. We have a chef who works for us and creates meals. So we have some videos. We're trying to work on our YouTube more. You can also, we have Instagram, all that kind of stuff. You can email us. Our email's on the website. If you live in Montana or Washington, you can actually see me as a patient through telehealth now. COVID has changed some things and made it easier for medical visits. If you're outside of those states, we do require that you have to come to Montana for your first visit. Makes it silly, but I do have patients do that if you want to travel. And then after that, we can do a lot of stuff over telemedicine. I will be doing a podcast shortly on ways to find a good doctor in your area. I do think that unfortunately, especially in the Midwest and like where you're located and out in that area, it's actually hard to find good functional medicine and naturopathic care. And so naturopathic.org is our association. And I think you could go in there and search in your location for doctors like myself that are going to just look more into your health and dive more into it than maybe your conventional MD. You can also think of functional medicine doctors. They've been certified and they tend to be MDs, NDs, etc. So they're just going to spend more time with you and do a lot of what I would do with you. I focus and specialize mainly in hormonal health and men's health and menopause and postmenopause. But yeah, I mean, elevatehealthmt.com is our clinic website if you want more information. I also do free consults through there. You just have to make an appointment through there. And yeah, just one of millions of different things.
Well, Doc, it's been awesome. Thank you for sharing. I know that's a lot of information compounded into a short amount of time. So I do recommend that people, dig into this further if they have some questions or anything like that. And I'm sure you're more than happy to help. So thank you so much for coming on and thank you for sharing.
Thanks, Lucas. Take care.
And once again, thank you so much for listening to the Publicly Challenged podcast. I hope you enjoyed the show, and if you did, please subscribe on whatever platform it is you're listening to. Also, if you could leave a review, that would help us out. And you can check us out on Instagram or at publiclychallenged.com. And once again, thank you so much for listening to the show.